morning. Thank you for coming in. My name is Zuzana Sekerova. I go by Zoo, so if you're from Austin and you're like, you didn't know that was your full name because everybody calls me Zoo. And I'm going to be talking about AI-enhanced leadership. And it's really, as I mentioned earlier, about how you can use AI to help you in specifically people management. So again, we talk a lot about how you can incorporate AI in your products and how do you ship that to customers and that benefit. But we learn about ourselves. How do we make our job a little bit easier, but not just easier, but also better. Before we go there, all of the wonderful sponsors of this event that this event couldn't happen without. So check them out, Pragmatic Institute, Log Rocket especially, and then of course this wonderful space. This is amazing, by the way. We're always looking for spaces to host events. I lead the chapter of Women in Product, and this is primo space. So very appreciative of being here. Wow. All right, so before we jump in, I want to tell you a little bit about me, who I am, and I think it will quickly show you why I'm passionate about today's topic. So that first picture over there is of me at the Olympics. My journey to becoming an Olympian taught me the importance of discipline, perseverance, and the value of receiving detailed feedback from my coaches. And just as in product management, the continuous feedback is really what helped me get better. These days, I also like to race bikes. And cycling not only fuels my passion for being active in sports, but it also kind of mirrors my professional journey. I rely on my bike on real-time feedback about my speed, power, and all the other things that I need to be tracking, my heart rate, et cetera, et cetera. And that allows me to, again, get better, improve my performance because I have a very specific real-time feedback to go off of. But that's just like riding bikes, right? That just all comes together. That third picture over there is me leading a meeting of Women in Product, as I mentioned earlier. Mentoring and uplifting other women is really important for me, and mentoring is kind of, again, connected to that feedback and being able to give back to the community, things that I have learned, but also learning myself from that community. When I become passionate about particular topics, I want to share them. I want to allow other people to learn from the things that I have learned, and that's why we're here today. This is why I'm standing here in front of you and sharing on this topic that just really, got me going. And lastly, they're my two dogs. You can't start a presentation if you have pets without putting one of those out. But the way that fits in is I've done quite a bit of training with the dogs. And again, there's that importance of patience, communication, and clarity in that. And yeah, that mirrors sort of like that leadership, right? Like being kind but being clear. And that kind of translates into results. All right, so that was enough about me, but let's talk about us as leaders, whether you're a leader today or a leader that you want to be. We're dealing with a lot. There are diverse personalities in the workspace. Managing these personalities can be quite difficult. There are misunderstandings because we are different. Maintaining sort of harmony on a team with these personalities can be a challenge. We also, as leaders, need to balance empathy and accountability. Striking that right balance between the two, holding members accountable, but also being that human leader for them, is tough. Raise a hand if you've been in that situation. Yeah. I like to say being clear is kind, and that's, I think, really resonates, especially with this particular challenging topic. We as leaders very rarely receive any training on how to be better people people leaders, right? It's very rare. You're like, hey, you've been doing the thing, here are people, lead them, good luck. And then you go, oh, I thought I got this, but this is a whole new subject that I need to learn about. A lot of the times we're thrown new challenges through the organizational changes that we need to lead through our teams. Our teams get a little discombobulated when they're thrown at, whether that's layoffs that a lot of us have gone through, have experienced, whether personally or through friends or through companies that we were at. Or it's simply a smaller changes to where we're shifting focus, or teams are being moved. These engineers need to move over there. We have different priorities. All of those things are we as leaders need to manage that change for our teams. A lot of communication barriers that can happen, that can lead sort of to miscommunication. We have things like time zones and even preferences in communication. I'm personally ESL, so if you've ever experienced that, sometimes finding just the right words that express the right ideas and get the teams going can be tough. And then we have to manage conflict. I don't know if you've ever had to do that, but it's not just conflict between us and other people, but it's also when two team members have conflict and you're right there to trying to get them to come together and work together better. So these are all of the challenges that we as leaders are navigating through. And actually, it's not all of them. There's a lot more of them. But let's kind of call it a pretty good sort of a theming of those. Before I go into sort of like that next section and talk about like, okay, how do we solve some of those challenges, I also want to talk about this because I've thought about it a lot. I was actually very resistant to using AI myself because I felt like I'm here to do the thinking. If I were to just type the thing in and it tells me what to do, like, one, what's my purpose in here? Not about necessarily replacing my job, but am I doing my job well? If this thing can just do the thing. And let me tell you that I have come around, and really now I think of AI as a tool to streamline the management tasks, but it does not replace those human leadership skills and relationships that you need to build. And just like any tool, it can be used for good. It can be used for people. And so just as you wouldn't necessarily outsource a task to an intern, and without giving specific instructions, reviewing it, adapting it, adding to it, just take it from an intern and hand it in for your boss, you wouldn't do that with AI. You don't just give it a thing, whatever it tells you, here's what we're doing, right? So think of it that way. If you had an intern, you had a really important project, you wouldn't just not look at it and just trust it and toss it out there. And so remember, you're still the manager. AI is here to support you, not to replace you. And it's crucial that we kind of maintain that role of leadership, providing the human touch, especially, and the oversight necessary to make the decisions of leaders. So embrace AI, but sort of continue to guide your team to success as the human as you are. Quick disclaimer. If you don't know what your policy within your company is using AI, check into that. There are a lot of free tools, but as some of the things I'm talking about and saying that it works better with is giving a lot of context, giving a lot of specific information about people, projects, and the company in order to get better results. And you may or may not want to do that in a free version that's sort of like out there in the world, like kind of a walled off private version of whether ChatGPT or whatever other AI tool that might be more beneficial. You might want to think about how you're going to anonymize some of the things and then sort of do the work to make it more specific to you, the people. All right. So we are juggling a lot of things as people leaders. We're setting clear expectations. We're aligning team goals. We're holding one-on-one meetings. We're doing skip-level meetings. We're coaching, mentoring, empowering, managing team dynamics, fostering collaboration, upskilling, promoting, hiring, and occasionally also exiting people. So there's a lot there, but today we're going to talk about these 3 specific things, and I'm going to talk about some ideas. It's not solution. You take this and, here you go. You're good at setting clear expectations if you do this one thing. But it's an illustrative example of how you might be able to do that in your company, same for managing accountability and supporting personalized growth. I will show some of those examples of how you might be able to leverage AI. All right, well, let's jump in. We're getting into the meat of what we want to talk about. And so it's not enough to say, do better at fill in the blank, right? You're giving someone feedback and like, do better. What does that really mean? It's really important to have that specific what better actually looks like. And I was recently talking to a coworker of mine about this, and he shared a story with me that I wanted to share with you. He was given feedback that he should become more strategic. I don't know if you ever heard that. I heard that too, and I was like, yup, cool. What does that really look like? And so he went on to this journey to try to figure out how do I become more strategic? Well, that's the feedback I was giving, but that's it. How do you actually do anything about it? And so, because he was determined to grow, he started sort of observing leaders that he inherently knew that were more strategic and starting to peel back. Like, what makes them more strategic? What does that really look like? What are the actual skills that I need to gain in order to do that? And so he distilled it to a few things. It's certainly not the biggest, all-encompassing picture, but he understood that he needed to start providing more context. And then he needed to start doing more framing rather than just dumping beautiful roadmaps and saying, here are my features, it's perfectly aligned and all of these things. Saying, why do we need to do this? What is the context of the larger market within which this makes sense? What is the product positioning? Maybe there's another product that's very similar to ours, but how are we actually positioning differently and why are we going to win? What are our business priorities and how does this specifically that I'm proposing fit within that really, really well and solves the problem we're trying to solve? Not only that, he also realized that he needed to become a better storyteller, right? Like he needed to take that framing, take all of those things, and tell a really good story. But this took him years to realize through observation and learning, right? He became a much better and strategic thinker, and that's the role he's in. He's a very strategic product manager. But man, wouldn't it have been nice if somebody kind of helped him outline some of those skills and say, you're doing X, and you need to kind of like sprinkle in these skills, and these are the things that you need to learn that took him sort of years of observation and figuring out. And so really what that means is don't be a judge. Don't raise the score and say you didn't do well. Raise that 1, 2, or 0. What you really want to do is be a coach. Be specific about how you're going to provide that feedback. Lift that elbow a little bit this way, and then when you do that, then you tighten this muscle, right? So if you take that coaching, how do you take that into the role that you're in and provide that very specific feedback that's actionable? All right, so let's talk about an example that I have gone through with someone that I was managing. So instead of saying, hey, you need to write better product requirements docs, I need to explain what better actually looks like so it can be actionable. I needed a starting point. We didn't use a specific framework for our product requirements docs. If you did, you could say, hey, we use this framework. Let me explain that framework first. But what I ended up doing is I started just asking about like, hey, I know what product requirements looks like, but I could use some help explaining why that matters, right? So the prompt that, and by the way, all these prompts are not word for word, right? Like there's a bigger context, bigger conversation I was having, but it gives you an idea. And this is how, by the way, I literally say like, let's talk about this thing. That's how I prompt. And it's worked for me really well. I'm not an expert, but I was getting the results, so I continue with this approach. So it's like, hey, let's talk about the purpose of product requirements documentation and why product managers write them, because I want to explain that, like, if the person I'm managing can understand the purpose they're doing it, then they don't think it's just a document they need to write. And it's just like, right? So that was the first bit I wanted to do. And I was using specifically for this ChatGPT because we have a walled off version, so I can like dump literally everything about the company in there. So I felt really good about it. It's kind of small over here, but you can see it kind of created the purpose and why it matters. And then I was able to say like, okay, let's keep these sections of that, and it's a good framework that I'm going to explain these things with. And then I took it a step further. The person that I was managing was someone who was more junior. And so I needed to also take into account, what do you expect from different levels of product managers, right? Associate, product manager, senior, principal. And so at their level, I needed to set expectation what a product requirements doc would look like, which wouldn't look the same at a later level. And so I specifically said things like, well, at their level, I don't expect this employee to manage highly complex product requirements docs independently. For larger projects, they need to seek that help themselves. And I wanted to make sure I incorporate that. They're not waiting for me to provide that help. They're seeking that help. And here's how we're going to go about that. These sections, right, again, the prompt's a little bit shortened because the prompts get pretty long if you get very specific. And then I spoke a little bit about how, these sections from that previous outline, I want them to be able to handle on their own. The context, the goals, the scope, and I included exactly what that means. Not just saying the goals, the purpose, but like the goal. That means you need to articulate the clarity and the purpose of the feature and the product that you're building, right? So that they have a really clear understanding what that means and what needs to be included. And then I segregated a section that said, and for these more complex things, like these sections, and here's, by the way, what those sections mean, you're going to seek help, and your job is to fully incorporate feedback from other people, and when you're not getting that feedback, you come to me, and you ask me for that help, but your job is to make sure it's in there, right? You're getting that help, but that's your job. So now, having this very specific feedback, that person is able to action it, right? Like they can look at it and say, okay, I'm a product requirements docs looking like this. Do they have these sections? Do I understand what those sections mean? How do I achieve that? Versus saying, do better. Those product requirements docs are not helping your teams. Done my job. But we all know that that's a little bit easier because going through this process and doing this amount of writing and this amount of clarity takes a lot of time. And let's be honest, a lot of us leaders are expected to do a lot of things. I specifically am both an IC and a leader. So it's like, we're doing 2 jobs, sometimes 3 in one. So going through this process, it was definitely helpful to have ChatGPT to help me with that. All right, let's talk about another example of managing accountability. This is also from a specific example from my team. And so as we were forming as a new team, we need to set clear expectations. And here you see, this is, by the way, like maybe half the prompt that I gave it. So I write really long prompts because I found that giving a lot of context. Now, sometimes I break it up, right? Like there are sections in there. So you can also do that, like do this step and then do the next step and action it. But as we were sort of forming as a team, we realized we needed to really understand how do we work with each other, what are the agreements that we made in order to be effective. And it's hard to hold someone accountable if you never set the expectations or never achieve things, right? So again, it goes back to that previous step, setting clear expectations. Then you can go into the step of accountability. So this is kind of a little bit blurred lines there. And so we did this brainstorm session. The brainstorm session included both the things that we wanted to do, but also the things that we wanted to avoid. In the old world, I would have done one of these things where I start grouping things, and naturally my brain all went there, and I was like, okay, let me start reading these things, grouping, and it's like, hey, ChatGPT do this, right? Like all the theming and grouping. And so at this point, I was just like, I'm just interested. I did the grouping and theming already, kind of a thing. But if I just dump it into the AI tool, is it going to come up with similar themes and groupings? So I sort of did some of the grouping already there. But then ultimately, I asked ChatGPT to do some of that for me. But first, I added some of that context. I said, as a new team forming, We did a collaborative session on ways of working together in order for everyone to feel engaged, excited, and about the work that we do and deliver most value for our customers in the company. And so what we want to do is create some principles we as a team agree to that help us ensure that we have a good team communication and collaboration. What I want you to do is analyze the team's feedback, group the feedback into themes, and come up with 3 suggestions for team principles for each of these themes based on the team's feedback. And it was important that they see that the feedback was incorporated in here because people tend to agree to and adhere to things that are not sort of dumped at them as rules, like you need to follow this set of rules, but they help co-create. For this brainstorm, again, I use ChatGPT because we have the Waldorf version, so it allows me to dump everything in there. But there are a lot of free tools, like Figma has Figma AI, FigJam AI. If you're using Miro, there's Miro AI, so you can like directly do some of the synthesis straight out of there. But then, you know, that second part of the feedback, like, okay, I have these themes, but I want you to actually create the principles, ended up looking something like this. So ChatGPT was actually from prompt that looks something like that. Again, it's not word for word, but it looked very similar to what I posted. Was able to say, okay, well, here are your themes. Here's the specific feedback and the themes, the insights from that feedback. And now this is what I took and created these specific principles, and I was able to just tweak them a little bit where needed, right? So the feedback was that we needed more communication transparency. We needed to get unblocked more quickly on projects, and with time zones that can complicate catching up on status of projects, we needed to kind of figure out how to do that, how to do those handovers. And so then the principles look something like we embrace open communication. And of course, like it wrote it differently, but then I gave it a format. Like I want you to write it in this style for those principles, not like you should. It's like we do this, right? Like in the present tense and all of that. So you can sort of work with ChatGPT, the format it looks like. But really what it came up with, we embrace open communication and we prioritize public channels for updates over DMs because we cared about that transparency, right? Like multiple people said, hey, we need to see what's happening. Everyone attends daily stand-ups to align on work progress and get unblocked quickly. And we create clear handoffs between team members and time zones to keep moving forward with projects, right? So it was addressing how do we address the time zone thing, and we need some sort of process, and we're committed to the handoffs. And then again, it created it for the other theme and for the other theme, and so now you can do, hey team, do we agree to these things? Do we need to tweak it? Yes, cool. Now we can hold each other accountable. We can hold ourselves accountable to these agreements that we co-created together. Because you're co-creating it and you're using AI, it makes it easier, but it also makes it more effective because you went through that entire process. You need to do all of these things by hand and like read the stickies and figure it out and do all of the wordsmithing. I'm ESL, like the wordsmithing is not my thing, and this is why I love all of the AI tools, because I can just go ramble on that. Yeah, I know, I think I really, like I know what I want, but making it clear and concise can be difficult for me, especially in English. I haven't tried in Slovak this time, but you know, I blame it on the ESL. I'm blaming it on but anyway, use the tool to actually help you do these more complex things, these more time-consuming things that do allow you to be a better leader, but actually do them quicker so you can get to that outcome of we created agreements, we are able to hold each other accountable. So here's an example of how you engage. All right, and let's talk about sort of supporting that personalized growth and opportunities. There's actually a well-known quote by a Dutch author, and it says, when a flower doesn't bloom, you fix the environment in which it grows, not the flower. And as you know, like a lot of those apps for plans became pretty popular because the truth is that each plant grows and thrives and has different specific needs how it does that, right? Like maybe it's a different type of soil, maybe it's nutrients, maybe it's the watering schedule. And then also like what location is placed in, is it inside, is it outside, what's the altitude where you live in, how much sunshine it's getting. And so there's really no one size fits all how you care for the plant, which is why we need those apps to tell us, like, I don't know, I just water the thing once a week, but I don't know it's more. And people are no different, right? Like there's no same growth plan that you can sort of take like this worked really well and dump it on another team member. They're different human with different contexts. The cool thing is that all of these AI tools have made it a little bit easier for us to get more personalized. Hopefully, you already have a lot of artifacts in your leadership. Things like you're keeping one-on-one notes, right? When you're having one-on-ones, you're writing down, like, we talked about these things, this is what the person cares about. Maybe you even talked about, like, their preferences. Maybe you talked about, like, how do they like to be rewarded and what matters to them, what are they thinking about, what keeps them up at night, those types of things. You're also noticing peer feedback. That might be through sort of like those official channels, but it might also be things in Slack, right? Like peers going like, oh, wow, yeah, you did a really great job. And you're noticing that you might be saving some of those things and saying like, their peers are recognizing them for the work they did here, and here's the specific context in which they recognize them. They might be producing some status updates about projects that they're doing. Again, there's an artifact there that you could be keeping in mind. Oh, wow, yeah, I want to remember they did a thing. They struggled with this previously, but now they're telling me how they solved that problem. And here's the feedback they're getting, and here's the release, and here are the results that they're posting about their products. They may be also, you had them create their personalized growth plan, right? Like, where do you want to grow? What do you want to learn? What do you care about? What are the skills that you're developing? And that could be, again, through the annual reviews. Maybe there's a section there. So you have all of these artifacts. And you can mix and match them to start creating like, wow, I want to promote them, but I actually want to create a very specific, impactful statement about why I'm promoting them. That includes the projects they did, the peer feedback, how it's been received, how they have grown, and I can name specifics. I'm not just like fluffy promotion thing, because I have these artifacts. I've been saving those things. I know where they're at. It takes a little bit of management of making sure that, you are getting those notes, you are keeping those. You can shove it into one of these tools and say, hey, I'm promoting this human, and you in your head know, like, because they're doing these things, help me articulate it more specifically and bring some project examples and timelines and things into it. It's not that the tool's doing it for you. You already know the result. You know why you're promoting them, but it's helping you articulate that from all of these artifacts. You can provide meaningful recognition. You have those specifics about how they prefer to be recognized. You know things about their projects, timelines, and those things. You can mention those. And when that person said this thing, right? And so it's not just a fluffy like, wow, you're doing a great job. And everybody's like, yeah, thank you for mentioning me. But it's like, wow, you did the thing, and it did the result, and like it resulted in these things, and your peers mentioned da-da-da-da-da, right? It's a much more impactful recognition that way. And you can create stretch projects, right? Like if you understand their growth plan, you know what they want to do, you know how they want to learn it, you know what the company is doing, right? Like, again, you pull these pieces together and you say, okay, how do I match them? Give me some ideas how I can give them the ability to develop that skill that they're telling me they want to learn, and we also have a need here, right? And so think about how all of those artifacts you have about people can help you manage them better and do sort of all of these things. That's it. Any questions?
So did the tool ever surprise you and come up with an answer that was very different than what you had from Vibes?
You know, like with anything, I definitely, when I was doing some performance coaching, it would toss out either some like fluffy stuff, and I was like, yeah, forget about this. We're gonna focus on this one thing you actually got right. And like, so yeah, it's not 100%. It doesn't. That's why I'm like, it's not take this and hand it in, right? It's help me think through this thing. I think this is what's happening. Here's where I want to coach. Let's work through that. Here are some artifacts. I've done things like diffing two versions of a document in order to be able to provide, like, I think this is happening. Like, it didn't, I provided some feedback on how to incorporate it into that product requirements doc. I don't think it quite, like, what happened between version 1, I provided all this rich feedback. What's going on here? How do I articulate that, right? So I've done some of those things to give me specifics. Some of them were not on point, but I was like, that's what's going on, right? Like,
you mentioned you're an English second language speaker, and I'm wondering if this helps you communicate with team members on your team who actually weren't native English speakers as well. Has that helped you in terms of cultural barriers?
I haven't used it specifically in a way that says, hey, help me do this in a way that helps so-and-so with this cultural background. But I think if you put things in writing and you help things be clear, let people absorb that at their own time, that helps with ESL, right? When it's not in the moment, you're like, what does that word mean? Or like, what's the context in which you're saying that? So if you're doing things in writing, making them clear helps with that. But you're right, you could go as far as say, hey, I want to incorporate some cultural norms and backgrounds into this thing, if that matters in how you meet people.
Do you use it in order to talk about promotion? How about setting performance expectations as far as performance plan, and then making sure to measure to that? Are you using AI to say, okay, here are the parameters of what I'm trying to do for your particular job, comparing it to others, and by the way, here's my expectation at the end of 6 months or a year when performance review is required, and you incorporate that. Maybe that for that.
Yes. I am not a big fan of like the measurement of, you know, like again, put it in there. Did you do the thing? There's a number. Like there's a lot more complexity to the human performance. But yes, like in a little bit more human terms of, hey, we are talking about these things and here's how you achieve that. I asked you to be more strategic, which meant X, Y, and Z. And between this time and this time, comparing two documents or two work outputs, I was able to see that you have incorporated those skills and those things in here. Yes, we are at time. If you want to talk to me about this topic after I'm around. Thank you so much for coming.